Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah and let's talk books. It is the end of the year and it really doesn't feel like it. So really didn't feel like Christmas either, but here we are. I actually was not planning on filming this today. I was going to do it tomorrow, but then the opportunity arose to film it right now. So this is a bit more spontaneous than usual. I did read 7 books this month, so let's jump right into it with the first one, which is Extinction Hymns by Eric Raglan. This is a collection of horror short stories, all by the same author. This actually just came out December 15th. I received this as an e-arc through NetGalley, and I give this 4 stars. So usually when I review a short story collection or anthology or whatever, I will individually rate them and then average out those ratings at the end, and that will be my rating for the book. This, I really didn't do that because it is 18 short stories, so it was quite a lot, and I just kind of didn't want to do it for that many. And the book is only 187 pages, so a lot of these stories are only just a few pages long, so like writing a description for each story and rating them individually just really didn't fit the vibe, I guess, while I was reading this. But most of them were hits for me, like there was very few misses here. And this book does contain content warnings at the very end where I did list out each individual story and the content warnings associated with them in my Goodreads review. So if you are interested in picking up this book, definitely check that out. I do think the first several stories in here were the best, but each story in here was very unique, like from each other, and they all felt very like fresh and new. I was really surprised by each one, and this was very easy to read. Like I just kept flipping the pages, like I just wasn't really stopping between stories besides like contemplating my life in between some of them there. But this author has one other anthology, and they do have short stories in like other collections, but their debut was an anthology of just their stories, and this was their second one. So I definitely want to pick up that first one at some point because I was pleasantly surprised by these, and I definitely want to read more. Next, I read They Came to Slay: The Queer Culture of D&D by Tom James Carter, which just sounds like 3 first names to me. This is obviously LGBTQIA+ like nonfiction. This just came out July of this year, and unfortunately, I only gave this 3 stars. So I've been playing D&D for a few years now, and like I'm also a part of the queer community, and so going into this, I was really excited. I thought I was gonna see a few different points of view and stuff. But it turns out this is more geared toward, I see Torty digging in the corner there. She's probably trying to make a cave. What are you doing, Tort? All right, we're gonna ignore her, kind of. But basically this book ended up being geared more toward people who haven't played D&D before and might be curious about it, who are still trying to learn about their identity. And that kind of surprised me because just so much of this book is literally just talking about how D&D is played, and I'm just like, I know, like I thought we were actually going to talk about the culture of it, not how to play it. And when it came to the queer aspects of the book itself, it got really, really repetitive. Because I mean, you read the title and you're like, okay, they're going to talk about how like creating a character is very important for queer people and like exploring your identity and things like that. And that's it. Like that's what the book is. It basically just takes that concept and just repeats it over and over through each chapter. And so it's just kind of like, I've already read this. And so unfortunately, I did walk away from this feeling like I hadn't learned anything new, which was a bit of a disappointment. But the way this is written, it definitely feels like you're reading like a friend's blog post or something like that. So it's definitely has this familiar tone and very friendly tone to it. And what kind of really brought the rating down for me is there's a sentence in here that I thought contradicted literally the entirety of the rest of the book. Because where queer people strive for equality and like being able to have the same rights as everyone else, this book just wrote in a sentence like the complete opposite of that. And it's just like, no, that's not it. That's not the right message. So even though this was a bit of a disappointment, I do think it's worth reading. Like I said, if you're new to D&D or still kind of like exploring your identity, and I am interested, like this is kind of part of a series, like they're not connected to each other. Each book is about something completely different, but it's called 404 Inklings, and they are all just like tiny little books like this. And I am interested in checking out the other ones that are available. Next, I read Earthdivers, which the story of this is by Stephen Graham Jones. The artist is David Gianfelice. I have no idea if I'm saying that correctly. And then the colorist was Joanna Lafuente. And this is a sci-fi horror comic book. I made the mistake of thinking this was a graphic novel when I picked it up. I requested it from NetGalley, so this is another e-arc. And so I started reading it, and like it ended very fast, and I was like, there's no way this is a graphic novel. But yeah, it turns out it's a comic book. And this just came out October of this year, and I also gave this 3 stars. So the art style of this is very, very eye-catching. Like, that was the first thing that made me click on this to even bother requesting it. We are like immediately thrown into the story. Like, you have no background, no nothing. Like, it's just boom, we're running ahead. And I feel like that ended up actually making it more confusing, because the whole concept of what these characters are trying to do, and this isn't a spoiler, it's the description and it's what you find out in the first page, is the apocalypse has happened. Like, we are in a desolate world where like most people are dead kind of thing, and they are going to travel back in time to kill Christopher Columbus to prevent him from discovering America, and which somehow makes the apocalypse not happen. They don't really go in depth over how this plan is actually supposed to work. So there are a lot of questions here that are not answered in this first volume, obviously. But another thing that ended up being confusing for me personally is I had a hard time differentiating between what was dialogue, like being spoken, and what was the inner monologue, like what was the thoughts of the character. And I've read a lot of manga and graphic novels, so it just seemed so weird that this was such an issue for me. So like, I'm not sure if it was how they were set up or if I was just having problems that day, but that's definitely something that really stuck out for me. And then I don't know if this is just because it's a comic book, but there were a few times where I was like flipping back through the pages like, this can't be it, right? Because like the scene jumps themselves would feel so sudden and abrupt. I would feel like I was missing information between scenes. And I don't know, just that feeling of almost being like left behind as a reader was just very strange and not something I've encountered frequently. And my biggest question here is like, how does killing Christopher Columbus prevent the apocalypse? Because wouldn't someone else just discover America then? Like, I don't really understand that concept of it yet. So like, I'm kind of intrigued and want to continue, but on the other hand, I'm just like, it was confusing. So do I want to? Not sure yet. After that, I read Grimoire of the Four Imposters by Coy Hall. This is a horror short stories, which I'll kind of explain in a second. And this came out September 2021, and I gave this 3.5 stars. And let's just take a second and admire that cover, because this is 100% why I picked this up. I don't remember where I first saw this. I don't know if someone else talked about it or if I just kind of saw it on Goodreads or what, but like, I love this cover. This is probably one of my favorite covers of the year, if not the favorite of the year kind of thing. But yeah, gorgeous. This starts out in a certain time period, and then we hear these 4 stories, which is this, the Grimoire of the Four Imposters. Each story is an imposter kind of thing. And then there's like kind of like a time jump of like 150 years or something like that. And we kind of have like the conclusion. So they're all interconnected. They all are part of one major story. So it's not really short stories in the way that you would normally think of them. And also the author's note in the beginning of this, I really, really like, because, and it also really confused me at first. I was like, what the hell am I getting into here? Because the author writes as if this like grimoire is an actual thing, like something that has existed for hundreds of years and people have found like over time kind of thing. And I really love that concept. And like, he talks about how people say that the stories change, like depending on who's reading it kind of thing and stuff. And I just really like that concept. It's not something new, like I've heard it before. It's just something that I think is fun. And also, I felt like the way this is written, like the formatting, this kind of feels like the Bible to me and how it's set up, where it's like these columns where there's quite a bit of space like on the edges and stuff. I don't know, it might be just me, but like, and how everything is like separated. There's always like little things there separating sections from each other and stuff. And I don't know, I just really got kind of like Bible vibes from this, and I feel like if that's the case, it's definitely done on purpose. And even though the 4 stories in here weren't like all on the same level, there were definitely some better than others. This is definitely one of the more unique reads I've had this year. And finally, this month, I finished the massive tome that is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. This is obviously a French classic. I've talked about this to death in my reading vlog. And this originally came out in 1862. And the only thing I'm going to say actually is that I did give it 5 stars, but I feel like that's super obvious just based on my adventure with this and the journey throughout the past year. And since this isn't one that I like picked up and ended in December, I don't really want to talk about too much of my thoughts or anything because I've talked about them so much in other videos. And also I will be having the conclusion of my reading vlog series coming up here in probably like 2 months-ish because I am horrible at editing stuff on time. And so if you just want to hear more about what I think of this in the end, I would definitely check that out when that is released. But just know this is a book that I definitely think everyone should read. Then I read Woman Eating, which is glaring very hard. Okay, there we go. By Claire Coda. This is a contemporary, like sci-fi, or not sci-fi, why am I saying sci-fi? I meant fantasy, horror kind of thing. And this just came out of April of this year, so I read a lot of new stuff this year. And I ended up giving this 4 stars, which actually really surprises me, and I'm going to put this book down because that's just too much glare, and we'll just pop up a picture instead. That's easier. So yeah, like I said, I'm surprised I rated it as high as I did because going into it, it's like so slow and feels dense. And even though it's only like 230 pages, I think it is, it felt like it took me forever to read. Like it felt so freaking slow to get through. And there is no plot here. Like this is 100% a character study. We are in the mind of the MC the whole time. And honestly, most of the time she's just laying on her floor thinking about stuff because she is a vampire. And her mom was also a vampire, but somehow gave birth to her. And so she was born as like a human baby. But she had like some major health issues. So when she was only a few days old, her mother turned her into a vampire. But she did grow up like normally. She just obviously had to eat blood instead of normal food. And so she kind of contemplates her upbringing, all the like self-hate that her mother poured into her, because her mom definitely has a lot of self-loathing kind of thing. And she is like 23 or something like that, and she's on her own for the first time in her life. So she's just kind of trying to figure out who she is, what she wants, does she want to live forever kind of thing. And so you definitely have to, I think, kind of be in a pensive mood to read this, because I feel like it would be very, very easy to get very impatient with this book or bored by it just because there is so little plot happening here. And then finally, my last read of the year, which actually brings me to book 90, is Everything is Fine Volume 1 by Mike Burchall. This is a horror webtoon, and this actually doesn't come out until May 16th of next year. So like I said, this started out as a webtoon online and is actually going to be published as a graphic novel. So this is Volume 1, which I think it said covers chapters 1 through 16 of the webtoon. And pretty much this takes place in what seems like a dystopian society where it's like Big Brother is always watching you kind of thing, cameras everywhere, you are always being monitored. And like the people have normal bodies, but like as you can see on the cover, they have a cat head, which I thought was real at first, but it's actually just a mask. So like they actually have human faces under there too. And so they don't have like expressions and stuff. But surprisingly, the way they emote and everything, like you can definitely like feel what they're thinking and what they're going through and everything. Like it's actually pretty impressive how much emotion is in this considering what they look like. But this is one of those stories where most of it is really subtle. It's very subtle horror, very subtle tension that ramps up. And like the first chapter, for example, you don't know anything going into this. And so everything is seemingly normal, but like there's just something that feels off. And then the last panel is a reveal where you're like, oh, this shit is crazy kind of thing. And I love that style where it's just the last panel just twists the entire rest of it on its head kind of thing and just makes everything have a different meaning. But it seems like the story is going to be about some individuals in this world that are kind of going to be pushing back against this monitored way of living. And there's some crazy scenes that happen in here. I really enjoyed this, and I don't know if I said that I gave this 5 stars or not, but yeah, I gave it 5 stars, and I'm highly debating checking out the webtoon online to try and read more and catch up with the series. We'll have to see how ready available that is. And that's all. That's everything I read for December, so that really kind of closes up 2022 there. And just a few days, it's 2023. Although when this goes up, it will already be that. But as always, thank you for hanging out with me. It is greatly appreciated. And thank you for hanging out with me for another year. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.